Hi, I'm Jim W6LG, your YouTube Elmer for Ham Radio Basics. Welcome to my Radio Room studio here in Rockland, California.
Whiskey 6
Stand
Lima
by for
Golf.
news.
Whiskey 6 Lima Golf calling. CQ, hello, CQ. CQ calling, CQ, hello, CQ. Whiskey 6 Lima Golf. Whiskey 6 Lima Golf.
A friend of mine had asked me to explain the instructions, the instruction manual for an Ameritron amplifier, so I downloaded it. As it turned out, it wasn't quite the right one. The one that I downloaded was for 572Bs. His amplifier contained AL-811As, 4 of them. In reviewing that page, as I started to look at it fresh, I hadn't reviewed it prior to that time, and I'm doing a video at the same time, so I'm recording and looking at this thing, and I'm increasingly irritated by a large number of mistakes. There were spelling mistakes, grammatical errors, punctuation errors, and the instructions I think were terrible, not easy to follow. A friend of mine who was a college instructor had difficulty with those instructions, and he taught English. So looking at it, as I got into it, there were some just obvious mistakes that it appeared to me that the instruction manual had never been proofread. There were just too many simple things. For example, on the front panel of the amplifier are the letters X, M, T, transmit, XMIT. In the instruction book they have XMT, and then they have XTM, and then they have XMIT. The piece of equipment that supplied the drive to the amplifier was described as an exciter in some places, I think a transmitter, and also as a transceiver. There was no consistency. And it's an easy thing to just change those words. So again, it looked to me like it had not been proofread ever. And those amplifiers have been out for quite a while. And what's my point in all this? Some of the comments that were made were, so the instructions were written, as near as I can tell, in the Midwest. Others didn't like my, we'll call it attention to detail, that I was nitpicking was one of the comments. That's fair because I was doing exactly that. And as I got into it, I changed from, let's look at how they talk about tune-up, to, hey, wait a second, this is just full ripe with all kinds of errors. And then I did start to nitpick. When I've written instruction manuals, I've written instruction pages, I have edited documents all of my life. And one comment was, or a couple of comments that, where was his red pencil? Well, good point. And if it had been paper, yeah, I would have had the red pencil out. If I'm going to review a document and there are, like an instruction manual, and there just are tons of errors, yes, I want to fix them if I can. And in this case, I think I can get them fixed. And it will make it easier for someone subsequently who gets one of those amplifiers and the instructions that they can figure it all out and make it work and not ruin the tubes, which are real expensive to replace. An important thing to keep in mind: we are so lucky as an older group, mostly men, to have companies like Ameritron High Gain, MFJ, I'm not going to be able to list them all, Yaesu, ICOM, Kenwood, Flex, Elecraft, dealers. We have some dealers that are just Gigaparts and DX Engineering, ham radio outlet, that are just as good as anybody can be. We are lucky to have them. So what does that mean? That means that when we come across something, let's say we buy a product and it's an MFJ product, and it doesn't work, and you determine what the error is. There's a loose wire or a wire on the inside that wasn't soldered. Everything else is done fine, but a connection was open, and therefore the thing wouldn't turn on. This is a true story. Contact the manufacturer. Yeah, you fixed it and you're irritated, but in a nice way contact them and say, hey, look, here's what I found, here's the serial number. Place a phone call. Talk to somebody there and explain to that person what you found. I think you have an obligation to help keep that company in business. And along those lines, think about what it would be like if MFJ did not exist. If Martin Jew had decided to practice law, or he was raised working in a grocery store, decided to work in a grocery store. How different amateur radio would be today. The impact of that one company on ham radio, amateur radio is really amazing. Fair to say that most ham radio guys have some piece of equipment that came from Starkville, Mississippi. Most of us have something. I've got a couple of MFJ 259 antenna analyzers and a couple of other things. For guys who are beginners into amateur radio, they probably buy several products that have the MFJ, Ameritron, high gain. I can't think of all of the brands that they have under their roof. What would it be like if that didn't exist? Martin decided to work in a grocery store and never created MFJ. Or did not have the drive to create a zillion products and a dizzying number of SKUs, stock keeping units. How different would amateur radio be without that stuff? So I'm grateful that companies like ICOM and Kenwood and Yaesu and MFJ and Ameritron and Flex and Elecraft and the dealers that we have are so good. They really are. That are willing to spend the money. For example, the ICOM 7300. Think about how much that cost to create. How much money had to be invested. Now they've made a ton of money off that transceiver. It's probably the most popular transceiver ever. Along those lines, Ameritron amplifiers are probably, I think I could say with some certainty, I said probably, I'm going to say they are, the most popular brand of amateur radio amplifiers ever. There are more Ameritron 811A type amplifiers and solid state amplifiers out there than anything else. How many guys have you talked to with an ICOM 7300 and some kind of Ameritron amplifier? Often it's one of the solid state ones, and some kind of a hex beam in the backyard. If he's lucky, he's got a hex beam. And what a great station that is. So again, in my looking at that one page of the instructions was not to pick on MFJ or Ameritron. I was proofreading it like I would do with any kind of document. And at the end of it, I made what I think is an exceptionally good way to tune up a linear amplifier. That if you follow the steps that I talked about and you do it exactly the way I discussed, when you get finished tuning up the amplifier, it will be linear, and you're likely going to have tubes that last for decades. If you don't tune it up properly and you drive the snot out of it and the grid current goes way high, those tubes are going to last weeks instead of decades. So mine was not a rant about MFJ. Again, if you get a product from them and there's something wrong with it, contact them. And I'll find out who that contact person is. I'll put a call in or an email to MFJ and try to put that in a subsequent video. Along those lines, here's what I'm proposing. Since a lot of guys use MFJ products, especially new guys who are looking to buy stuff to get their station put together, I'm going to make contact with MFJ and see if I can review some of their products that the typical new ham beginner would use, and then some that I want to use. I'm sitting in an area with all kinds of noise. They've got some devices that somehow get rid of noise, and I'd like to try those things. So I was critical, very critical, in reviewing the instruction manual for the Ameritron amplifier, and I believe I'm correct in doing what I did. Nitpicking, you bet. I'm looking for every mistake and going to mark it and say, here's a spot to correct. If I were reviewing the whole instruction manual, and I'm not going to do that for free, but if I were to do that, it would be red pencil probably all over the place, and I would do everything I could to make it make sense and have correct instructions so that someone tuning up an amplifier or hooking it up doesn't destroy the tubes. Again, what I'm proposing is I'll make contact with the MFJ, see if I can borrow some pieces of equipment and test them, and then give an honest report as to what I found. If the instructions are bad, I'm going to say that. If the thing doesn't work, I'm going to say that. If it works great, I'm going to say that too. And I would love to do that. I would love to have an ICOM 7300 to test. I don't need, and let me emphasize, I don't need any equipment. I've got more than I can take care of, and I'm very happy, I'm ecstatic with what I have. But it would be fun to see what's out there, because I don't know all of the products that MFJ have, even how many they have. I just know it's bunches. So that's a summary of my news for tonight. The video, last time I looked, it had a lot of views. Well, here it is. You refresh the page. It's at the time of this recording, it is 6 o'clock California time, and there have been 1,700 views in about maybe 30 hours, which is a lot, and likely it's going to continue to climb. So I'll add this video and try to tag it to the original one. Thanks for listening, and thanks for all the comments. There were a zillion. There were 211 so far. Thumbs up, 11 thumbs down, and 50 comments, which is really good. So comments that are constructive are good. Comments where you're saying, well, it's somebody in Mississippi and whatever, it doesn't help any. So let's stick with things that help out, and we'll go from there. So thanks for watching. I'm Jim, W6LG, your YouTube Elmer, for Ham Radio Basics in Rockland, California, 73. Bye-bye.